Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Sinclair. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're going to be talking about Gauntlet 2. What is the origin of that? Because we do that a lot, and I got it from you.
Well, in wrestling, if
I can't believe that came from. I can't believe that came from wrestling. I can't believe it. You know, I want to talk to you about marching band uniform parts because
okay, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Because this is where I learned so many different kinds of terminology. You know, like think about you got your gauntlets, right? Every marching band uniform has the gauntlets.
We didn't get gauntlets.
Oh well, you were missing out.
We had white gloves, crap gloves.
Here's another thing you get. You get spats. I know you guys rocked some spats back then.
We didn't get no spats.
You didn't have any spats? Man.
We got a dickie.
Okay, there you go. That was the third one, the dickie. Okay.
The dickie sucked. I hated a dickie.
Explain to the non-marching band oriented out there what a dickie is.
Well, non-marching band people wear dickies.
I don't believe that for a second.
You know, it's that kind of floofy, Liberace-esque plumage that you have on your chest.
I call that my manliness.
Is that what you call it? I don't call it that. I can tell you that right now. It's the opposite of what that is. And it's a gimmick that you have to there's a snap that goes behind your neck.
You fasten it round back, yeah.
And then you have to tie this stuff with some string. God, I've never felt like a bigger tool than when I was in the band. In a plastic suit with a fake dickie and a plastic hat and some uncomfortable shoes that cost $1,000. Walking around a muddy field like a dipstick with no one in the stands. What a joke that was. Every week in the rain. What the hell was I thinking?
Well, I can think of no better introduction to this week's game.
Play that for your students, Boat.
Than that intro.
Listen, the band has had its merits. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, hey, everything you said is true. I'm not going to argue with any of that. I remember
playing Cincinnati at the Tropicana Bowl. We drove there 2.5 hours. Cincinnati. It's a full-on storm is going on. Yeah, I've told this story, and I'm going to skip the White Castle part because but I mean, you're standing in ankle-deep mud in front of a panel of judges, no fans.
No.
Because no one's going to come out and watch you. Some band from Hurricane, West Virginia, and you're out there in this plastic cowboy suit with a big feather, and you're carrying a brass instrument, and you're cold and it's wet, and they want you to march in a synchronized way on a muddy field, and oh, by the way, play perfectly.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna happen. You looked like a doofus. You felt like a tool, and after that thing was over, you got your wet plastic butt back on the bus for a 2.5-hour ride home in shame. That's what that was. Not good.
Gauntlet 2, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you brought it up, Bo. Dadgummit. So Gauntlet 2, Bo. Now, before I like to go back to the source, Boatster. So let's talk about the original Gauntlet 2, the arcade machine.
Okay.
Sequel to Gauntlet 1, which was a huge Atari hit from back in the Dizzy. And Gauntlet 2, if I may say so, it picked up the Gauntlet and it didn't really run with it, but it sort of inched forward in the series. This came out in '86. This was you could play in the arcade. You had 2 or 4 player options, and this was a D&D style top down. What would you call this thing? Like a shooter?
Yeah. This is a top down shooter under the guise of with a D&D mask on. That's right. What this is.
Now, this expanded on the formula from the first game in some subtle ways, mostly different types of enemies, upgrades to your arsenal, your armor, stuff like that. And it was just, but it was pretty much, there weren't a whole lot of cosmetic differences in the arcade boat, as I recall.
No.
But Gauntlet was one of the first games that cost a fortune to play. Mm-hmm. I remember, that sort of was the turnoff for Bay.
Before I because I always think of our banter topics sort of on the spur of the moment, but I did think about doing one where we can talk about it now, because what else are we going to do? Was this the first game that you really peeked behind the curtain and you could tell immediately that they were trying to screw you out of money?
Let me see. You talking about the original Gauntlet?
Yeah, the original Gauntlet.
I'm trying to think when Dragon's Lair came out, what year, because both those games, yes, you knew it's like, oh, I'm getting screwed here, because this game didn't require. You could have skill, you could be better at it than other people, but at the end of the day, you're boned.
Right.
And it's going to require you to put some more money in.
This was the game for me. They had this game, and I believe it was even Gauntlet 2. I don't think it was Gauntlet 1. They had this game at the skate arena. The skate arena. And I remember seeing it for the first time, putting a quarter in, and as soon as I saw that health tick down automatically, I knew what kind of game this was going to be.
The funny thing is, if you get there's a potion you can get in the game that gives you indestructibility. Mm-hmm. But if you watch, when you have it, your health ticked down twice as fast. Right.
They knew the score. They knew what they were doing at Atari.
Any breaks in this game. The fact that you and your buddies can shoot the food is another thing. They want money now. Mm-hmm. But this was a huge hit. When I saw this in the arcades back in the day, it did draw a decent crowd. I wouldn't say it was the biggest hit in the arcade, but I will say Gauntlet 2, I think, was more popular than the first one. And one of the reasons is you could both play as the same type of character, because that was one thing that was this let you you could have two elves or two wizards, and that made a difference. That you could pick the color. And you can move on.
And you didn't necessarily have to be, because I believe in the original you had to be in a specific at the station, right?
It's funny. Me and the Brent bought a Gauntlet 2 cabinet. I think the Brent had planned to restore it because it came with a volleyball game in it, if you believe it or not. And actually, the volleyball game was a lot of fun, and we never bothered to take it out. And then we ended up selling the cabinet, but this is one of those games that was 4 players, but it wasn't like an extra wide cabinet. Like, I'm looking over here across the room here at my Royal Rumble control panel, and that was 4 players could stand comfortably around it and play it. Mm-hmm. This game, 4 players crowded together, like in the age of this virus, this would be a no-go.
Yeah.
Not going to get 4 people around this thing in the arcade, because it was not that big.
Speaking of cramped conditions, was your tag team or that wrestling game that you had for a time?
That was a little bit bigger, but not much.
Yeah.
That was another problem with that one. It just wasn't that huge, and so especially when you've got big buddies like I got, you need some space. And this thing didn't offer. Of course, this again, you got to think this is one of the first big time 4-player games there was. Mm-hmm. So you can't level any charges at him for that. They did their best. Gauntlet 2 was super duper popular. Of course, designed by Ed Logg Boat. I believe Ed wasn't he the same guy that did Battle Zone.
Ed did a ton of stuff. He did a ton of stuff,
as I recall. This game got ported to everyone that would take it, pretty much.
Atari was not shy about handing out the licensing rights.
You got that right, buddy. And plus, they also knew when they had money in their hands. And so they ported this thing out. So this is probably a partial list here, but you've got the Amiga, the Amstrad, the Atari ST, the C64, Game Boy, Bo. Did you ever play the Game Boy version?
I have not.
DOS, which the DOS version, not so good. I believe this was I'm thinking this might have been a booter. NES, might be the first one that was a booter. Did you play this on the NES, Bo?
I did. I played Gauntlet. Ooh. Maybe I did. I think maybe I played more Gauntlet 2 than Gauntlet 1 on the NES. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've also got, of course, the Spectrum version. So But this was a pretty popular game. They kept the ball rolling. Of course, Atari rolled these Gauntlet games into more modern arcade games that actually did pretty good as well.
Well, there was a significant break between the second Gauntlet game and the third Gauntlet game, which I believe was.
It was a good move to pick it up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And those were pretty good games too.
Home ports out of those too. And I remember playing the heck out of these things with the Chud.
Yeah,
he was a big fan of those more modern Gauntlet games. Mm-hmm. And of course, everyone likes dragons and undead and all that crap.
Yeah.
Getting treasure. So it played into every young teenage boy's wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. So anyway, here comes Gauntlet 2 for the Specky, released in '88. So you're not talking too long, a couple years there to bring it over. This came out. Now let me ask you, Bo. This had a 48K and then a 128K. I guess the music. Which one did you play this time around?
I played the 128K with the music.
I ended up playing both these. Just to get into it slightly, I had a heck of a time emulating this. I don't know why I had so much trouble. It was a real pain in the butt to get this thing to freaking run, but I finally did. But I did end up inadvertently getting to play both. So for once, I got to do the music one. The music was the opening music's not bad, is it?
No, and I believe that the only difference between the two versions is the opening music.
Yeah. But I mean, that opening music, and the music doesn't really keep going.
Yeah, I really like the tune.
Yeah, it's not bad.
A little something like that.
It's not as you would expect, as the old saying goes. Of course, the Specky had also had the original Gauntlet released on it, and they actually released a expansion of the like an extended game of the original Gauntlet. So it actually this was actually like the third Gauntlet, I think it was released on the Spectrum.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So this had your usual interfaces. Now you didn't get 4 people in this thing, Bo. Can you imagine 4 people crowded around the port?
What was that game that we played? Didn't they? There was it was 2 people on the keyboard. Yeah, I couldn't imagine 4 players.
There are 4-player games or more. I mean, it was chaos, but I mean, of course, that's
it's a turn-based affair. Yeah.
I like the idea of 4 people just manhandling a Spectrum and just beating the crap out of each other. I like that would be fun. Here you go. This comes up. It's got a pretty nice opening screen there, Boat, I thought. Pretty well done. And then you pick your character and your color. And then you go. That's pretty much all there is to it. What did you think of this what did you think of the way this thing played?
I thought that this was a very, very accurate rendition of Gauntlet. Gauntlet is a game that relies on 2 things. If you can do these 2 things well, you can have a good Gauntlet clone. It's got to be fast, and you got to be able to put a lot of enemies on the screen. If you can do those 2 things, you can have a successful Gauntlet clone. And that's 2 things that the Specky does really, really well. The Specky doesn't necessarily do multicolored sprites very well, but what the Specky can do is it can do tons of things on the screen, and it can do fast. And I was very impressed with this. Very impressed.
You're right. I agree with your assessment. And the funny thing about this game is, you're right. The color, not necessarily the Spectrum's best, foot forward, but this game manages, despite the fact that your basic characters and all the people after your moniker, it manages to be pretty colorful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of color on the screen. When it's there, I mean, you don't get the colorful floors and whatnot, but it's you get that stuff. You get everything that you need, to play the game. I like the fact that they keep a lot of the elements in the arcade the way they, you sort of coin up the way it looks. I thought it was strikingly solid, frankly, in terms of the way it played. Now. Some of the problems I had with it were effectively problems that I had with Gauntlet 2.
Yes.
Like you said, getting overwhelmed, getting it's sort of ridiculous, and of course it's a quarter muncher. But this game fell in line pretty well. Do you have a favorite character in this or the arcade or both?
I probably went with Questor whenever I played in the arcade. I've always been drawn to elves. Yeah. The problem with Gauntlet, well, like you put it perfectly, the problems that I have with this game are the problems that I have with Gauntlet.
Yeah.
And, the characters, there's not a whole lot of differentiation between the various characters. I mean, they all have a projectile. They all look differently. I believe, now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I seem to remember that in one of the Gauntlets in the arcade, do the characters start out with varying amounts of health or anything like that, or is it all the same?
They actually are all different in a lot of ways.
Okay.
I'll give you a quick rundown because I actually looked at the docs. Of course, I knew this from playing the arcade. You've got your 4 characters. You got Thor the Warrior. These names aren't real original either. But it's funny. Older fantasy games can just get away with this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But they had Thor the Warrior, and what makes him different is he's got like armor plated skin basically, and he does a lot of damage with his magic stinks, right? Then you got the Valkyrie Thyra. She's got a shield. All right, if you look in the game, so she gets 30% damage reduction, but her shooting is horrible, and her sword does good damage. And then you got Merlin, who has no armor, and he's got bare hands, and he can't even take out the generators, but he's got excellent magic.
Okay.
And then you get the elf is somewhere in the middle.
I'm going to stop you right
there. They have varying. They don't start at different hit points, I don't think, but they have varying degrees of how quickly they're going to lose the hit
I'm going to stop you right there because that may be true of the arcade version, but I went through and played every single character in the Spectrum version, and that was not the case.
Well, these are the Spectrum docs. I'm reading directly from them.
Okay. I did not notice this.
Yeah.
Because every shot kills a dude.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying because that's the way it is in the arcade. But I mean, and when it says like you're taking 30% less damage or 20% less damage,
if you're surrounded by 600 skulls, it doesn't matter. Yeah,
exactly. So when I remember playing this in the arcade, and this stuff was written on it on the machine, and you're like, well, yeah. I mean, you can tell a difference with like Merlin. I mean, he's pretty much boned, but everyone else they're pretty similar. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they say like Thor can do more damage or whatever. I mean, really, some stuff takes multiple shots, but it's not like you can tell what's happening. Yeah. So if that stuff's happening, you can't tell what's happening. Does that make any sense?
Right. Yeah. You're preaching to the choir.
Did you hear that huge explosion just now?
Yes, I did.
Someone shot off like a turn of the century cannon in my neighborhood. Yeah, I have no idea what that was.
And I heard it at Amigo Studios West. So yeah. Only in West Virginia,
Yeah. This seems to have. Now I'm not gonna sit and tell you that I played this thing for hours and hours, because I've played Gauntlet 2 a million times. This seemed, the maps seem to be pretty similar. I'm not familiar enough with the arcade version to sit down and go map for map.
Well, the maps change every playthrough. The maps will reverse themselves in some way. Like I could have sworn, like the second time and the third time that I played this, I was doing different things. Maybe not all the levels, but I could have sworn some of them are like they flip. Am I insane?
It's easy to. Even if they don't, it would be easy to get confused.
Yeah, maybe so.
This being on a black background, it does give you a feeling of stark emptiness. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's not filled with tons of people,
right?
And so I wouldn't say, like I said, I think the colors are good, but it's not what I would call I will say that cuts down on the confusion. But it's not what I would call a looker.
I would say in terms of Spectrum games, it is a looker because we've played so many of these types of games that are sort of monocolor. And this is not monochrome.
No.
To me, at the end of the day, the Gauntlet lives or dies by having friends around and you're playing together. Yeah. Gauntlet is not a good experience to play one player because what are you doing? You're not going to beat it. You're not going to get to the end of the game. You're going to die. You're going to die a lot. And if you don't have somebody that you're joking around with, that you're kind of competing with on score, you shoot the other guy's food when he's getting ready to get it. That's the joy of Gauntlet.
Honestly, I was never a fan of the Gauntlet series. I mean, not the original Gauntlets. I like the other ones a lot more. The old ones just didn't do it for me. And like you said, it just feels like it just feels pointless to me. It's like it's never. I don't like getting mobbed by stuff, and you can't move. Plus, there's the aspects where they make the maps kind of difficult to find your way around. And it was never my bag. Now that much said, I'm not going to come down on this version. This is as competent as a Gauntlet. I used to play this. I will say they had a version of this. I feel like a broken record. There was a version of this that came out on the Tandy And guess what? It supported the 16 colors and the Tandy sound, and it was great. It was probably the best home version at the time. But that much said, this holds its own, and the fact that you've got the multiplayer intact, I enjoyed it, but it's not what I would go back to play. But not because the version stinks; it's just not a game I enjoy.
Yeah.
I hate to crap on it like that, but there you
go.
Well,
it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's not much you can say. You sound sort of like me. I mean, this isn't one you play much in the arcade.
I don't like Gauntlet. It's just not. It's not my game. I love arcade games. Yeah. I love, I could rattle off 20 right now that are fantastic. This is not one of them.
The funny thing is I have friends come over to the arcade occasionally, and sometimes they ask to play Gauntlet, and I'll fire it up, and we'll sit around and play it for a little while, and inevitably they quit after about 10 minutes. Like, okay, what else you got?
Right.
It's because this is just not one I dug. Now, believe it or not, Boat, there was another Gauntlet on the Spectrum.
Really?
Gauntlet 3, The Final Quest.
Wow.
So one of these days we may have to look at the first or the third one.
I hope it's better than the third Renegade game, because that thing is garbage.
A lot of people prefer the first game. Now, I didn't play it because I didn't want to spoil it for myself. I didn't play the first one, but I have heard I read comments where people said they preferred the first game and the additional levels of the first game. So, go figure.
Interesting.
I looked this up on the old review zone there. Your World of Spectrum, we're giving this an 8.2, so pretty highly regarded, Boat. Your Sinclair gave this an 80, and Crash gave it an 80. So it looks like right in that sort of C+, B- area there, which I think that's fair. And again, I think this is a noble effort to make this game fun. I just think not necessarily a big fan of this game.
I want to say that that Crash and all those sorts of magazines are oftentimes needlessly hard on arcade ports. I think that they were prone to give higher scores to the isometric style games just because they were a totally different experience, a sort of unique to the Spectrum experience, and they were more apt to give, because I think that this is an A plus port for the Spectrum. It utilizes all of the strengths of the system, and it doesn't really introduce any weaknesses other than what is inherently you just can't do on the Spectrum. So,
well, I don't know how you could make it much better given the parameters.
Right.
I guess you could have. I mean, really, I don't know what else. I mean, if you added background something, you're not going to get that. So you're right. In terms of an emulation of this game or a recreation,
now
this is probably about as good as you're going to get.
Yeah. Now it could be
if you're going to rate this low, you just are rating it because you don't like the arcade game, which is fine.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
In terms of a port, this is a solid port. I didn't have any trouble with the port.
Yeah. So we got a bunch of Discord reviews. Our Spectrum reviews every week are off the charts. D-Man says, not much of an update from the original Gauntlet. Same game engine with just a few extra enemies and traps, so 0 out of 10 for originality, but 8.5 out of 10 for an additional slice of dungeon delving goodness, as this is still very playable. Lord Soup says, just took a peek at the YouTube gameplay demo. So, never mind. This is not a review. He's just commenting. I take it back. Paul, a.k.a. Hermski, says, a firm 7 out of 10 game. Always enjoyed the Gauntlet series, but preferred the original version for its originality. A game that's best played in 2-player mode, but frustratingly hindered full free roam. Players are forced to wait for each other to catch up, demanding characters to remain in the same visible area. This caused issues being trapped by the edge of the screen during a heavy battle. Overall, an attractive fast game with plenty of battles, action, and puzzles to solve. A game that keeps you hooked for hours. FrodoNL writes, not a lot changed compared to the original version. The main differences being a few new enemies, wall types, and the very irritating stun tiles. Yeah, I hated those.
Well, those were in the arcade.
I still hated them.
Yeah.
While it's still a good game, I prefer the original, plus the expansion, Gauntlet the Deeper Dungeons, if I want some harder levels. All in all, though, it is still quite amazing how playable the Spectrum version is. 7 out of 10. Chris Foulds writes, a decent evolution of the original and plays surprisingly well, though a bit repetitive, but arcade quality action. Not a Foulds favorite, more a Foulds Frabjuice. I don't know what that word is.
Did Foulds tail off in a drunken haze?
Possibly so. 6.5 out of 10. And finally, the man himself, Pixels at Dawn, writes, I have very fond memories of Gauntlet 2 as it is one of the games I spent the most hours with on the Spectrum, side by side with my mother in marathon all-day gaming session.
I love it.
Side by side with my mother in marathon. I thought that was another phrase, like a mother in marathon, but no, with my mother in marathon all-day gaming sessions as we fought our way through level after level of dungeon-based action. The Spectrum version is a really solid port with colorful, smoothly animated graphics and rock-solid gameplay. All the enemies, level skips, and bonus levels are intact, and it has a real atmosphere that's hard to rival on the platform. I will admit, though, for years, I thought death was a giant green fist with a pointing finger. I still think death is that, Pix. No less scary. Gauntlet 2 is a really special game, even over and above the first game. It's more fun with friends, but regardless, the adventure is there and waiting for you. Go for it. Get to it. 9 out of 10.
I will say, I did look this up on eBay. If anybody wants to pick it up, $10 or less, and you can pick one of these suckers up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Aaron, we got an iTunes review.
Oh, all right.
Yes. We encourage all of you out there, even if you are not a person of the Apple, to load up good old iTunes and leave us a podcast review, because so many other podcatchers use that as their aggregator, and they use iTunes reviews in terms of rankings and things like that. It's one of the best ways that you can help spread the word about our Sinclair, just like The Cure 1015.
Oh, The Cure, he's back.
He's back and he's ready for action. He says, listening from the UK in 2020, the only two gaming podcasts I listen to are this and the Amigos channel, which I'm guessing are the same people. Correct. Spectrum and the Amiga were the computers of my childhood, and I love hearing the individual game reviews with all the banter between. Really good channel, guys. Thank you, The Cure 1015.
We need to introduce The Cure to ARG and CoCo show and the Atari show.
That's right. We got a million of them.
Yeah.
And of course, we want to thank all the fine folks that are joining us live, from most of them coming from across the pond, though we have a few folks from the States that have tuned in to watch us. And we want to thank all the fine folks on the stream, including Ricky DeRocha, Polyester Links, 10 Mark, FrodoNL, the Retro Man Cave. We got Pixels at Dawn doing a great job as the mod in the chat. BarkBit is here with us. So, and I apologize that as soon as I went to read their names, the stream actually cut out. And so I
haven't lost you, Boat.
Yeah, we're still here together. This might be a weird OBS thing that's going on right now, but we're gonna ride this. We're gonna ride this train all the way to the station. We also want to thank all of our Twitch subscribers: Silver Streak 72, Chris Foulds, Macintosh Librarian, Wing Chun Wolf, FrodoNL, Rushi MSX, Honored Shadow, Mitsuyama Go Sub, Retro Jerry, BarkBit, Tapes from the Crypt, Pixels at Dawn Gaming, Still Adolescing, Jost 80, Darkwing 602, G Vebke, The Slow Norse, L Curtis B, and Duncan Styles. Thank you guys so much for supporting us on Twitch. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we would be nowhere without our Patreon supporters. We want to thank all of our Patreon supporters, including Mark Downey, Hermski, Andrew Waite, Cap and Crispy, Laurent Giroux, Gary Heather, Eric Nelson, Horrorbonaut, Graham Vebke, FrodoNL, Tapes from the Crypt, Pixels at Dawn, Chris Foulds, Boss Man, Paul Harrington, getting it done as always, and Christopher Hassel. Thank you guys so much for supporting us on Patreon. Next week, Aaron, it's Deflector, spelled Ultimate Cool Guy style with a K.
Oh boy. Is that some sort of, you know what that is yet?
I don't know what it is.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I bet it's a shooter, Boat.
Might be. Might be. This was suggested by Clive's Club member Paul Bossman Harrington himself. Thank you so much, Bossman. Thank you, Clive's Club, for suggesting this game. This game, Pixels at Dawn. This was a Pix Pick Gauntlet 2.
Good choice.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Until then, rewind tape.
And press play.